Hi, this is Nick Schrammick and Howard Chao from Doon Insights for our next episode of our podcast, What's Next In? And today, Howard is speaking to the founder of Suited. And Suited is a legal tech company, but they also look at a few other different areas, a company that I found very fascinating. Howard, what did you think about them? What really struck you about this company?
Well, I had a particular interest in them personally because I have another investment in a company that's in a parallel space, not in legal tech, but also doing recruiting using AI as a kind of a technique to evaluate candidates. And so Suited was in somewhat familiar territory for me. It seems like an area where a lot of progress can be made. I mean, law firms and other hires of legal talent often rely primarily on the intuition of interviewers. And this was a company that was helping companies get beyond that and be more scientific about it. So and plus the founder is a very charismatic individual. So I thought it was particularly interesting.
Great. Well, let's get right into it. This is Howard's interview of Suited with the founder, Matt Spencer.
Okay, this is Howard Chao at Doon Insights again, and we would have with us the CEO and founder, Matt Spencer, along with my co-interviewer, Ali Shahidi, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Shepherd Mullen, and he's going to help me do the interview. So first, let me ask Ali to self-introduce a little bit. Tell us what your role is at Shepherd Mullen.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Howard. Yes, I'm Ali Shahidi, Chief Innovation Officer at Shepherd Mullen. I've been in my role for 4+ years, and I've been in the legal industry for 20+ years. In terms of my role at Shepherd Mullen, I work across functions to evaluate and adopt solutions that will help with the practice of law. The functions that I participate in collaborating with include our talent management team, and one of those projects involves collaboration with Suited in the past 2 years to help kind of define the use case, define the pain points, and hopefully come up with a solution that will be adopted across the industry.
Great. So we're going to plunge directly into Suited and Matt in your company's history. So can I start by asking you, Matt, to give us a little bit of the background of how you got into this business, what your background is, and how you thought of this idea?
Sure. Thanks, Howard, and thanks, Ali, for inviting us here. So my background was actually as an investment banker. I spent 8 years post-MBA as a mergers and acquisitions banker at Houlihan Lokey, and then subsequently moved over to the talent side of the business and spent another 4 years as the Chief Human Capital Officer at the firm, effectively overseeing all the talent management strategies globally. So everything from recruiting, training, professional development, D&I, performance management, et cetera. And it was really in that role that the idea for Suited came to be, which was that there were a number of different challenges that we as an individual firm were facing in the marketplace for talent, challenges that we felt like technology had reached a point where we should be able to use it to deploy it. But when we went out to the marketplace to look at the tools that were available, we came away feeling very frustrated because we felt like everything out there was built for some other industry, and it just wasn't going to give us the level of relevance and impact that we ultimately needed to bring into our processes. So we said, let's go build our own, and that was really the start.
Okay. And so it sounds like you started with the investment banking industry. And had you had much contact with the legal industry before then?
Yeah, I mean, as a banker, obviously we worked a lot with transactional attorneys, across the spectrum. Actually, had known Shepherd Mullen for years from working both on the same side of the table and across the table with him. And so I had a general sense for the pain points that they were feeling. But after we launched our investment banking platform in the spring of 2019, we really wanted to look at what other industries we should be focused on. Our view was always that investment banking would be a great proof of concept because it was a small group, known players that we could put together in this network to affect what we wanted to do. But the legal industry was very attractive to us. And as we started talking with law firms, Shepherd Mullen being literally the first, we came away really excited because we understood that the pain points that they were experiencing, while the process was different, the pain points that they were experiencing were the same. And so we felt like what we had proved and validated on the investment banking side, if tailored and developed specifically for the legal industry, could ultimately be successful.
Okay, so now you got to tell us what you do. What is it? What's the idea? What's the pain point and the problem you're solving?
Yeah, you got it. So, I mean, starting with the pain point, I guess, historically, talent decisions across all these different industries have really been led by resumes of candidates and then the gut instinct of interviewers, neither of which are really consistently predictive of success, but both of which are consistently fraught with plenty of subjectivity and bias. And so, as a result of that lack of reliable and consistent measurable data, poor decisions lead to hiring mistakes and then internal strategies that have substantial and costly consequences to the firms. And so our approach is really to combine three things. We bring proven assessment science out of the field of industrial organizational psychology, cutting edge data science in the form of artificial intelligence or specifically machine learning, and then powerful network effects driven by bringing all of these different firms within a common industry onto a single platform in order to deliver what we call hiring intelligence or data that's going to enable our clients to ultimately make better hiring decisions and reach and consider a larger pool of talent, increase diversity, hire a larger number of high performers, and ultimately avoid costly hiring mistakes.
So do you use a lot of AI in your system then?
We do. When we start working with a firm, we will typically have their incumbent attorneys go through and complete the assessment that we developed and collect that data. We correlate that against performance data that the firm provides us and leverage machine learning technology to look at and identify across all those different characteristics and all the possible combinations of characteristics, what is it about high performers within the firm that is differentiating them from average or lower performer attorneys to build customized selection models that are going to help firms be able to quickly and accurately understand from candidates who subsequently are completing that same assessment who are likely to be the best performers on their platform.
So how much does this vary across firms? I mean, how tailored is your platform to a particular client?
Yeah, we actually see a lot of differentiation. It's a very common question that we get from our firms is how different are we all? And we see a ton of differentiation. We measure in total across the assessment. We have 10 personality characteristics, 9 different values, 3 stress response styles, and then 3 what we call essential competencies, which are effectively innate cognitive skills. And across all those different characteristics and the combinations of them, we start to see very different profiles emerge of what's driving success at one firm versus another, or even to subgroups within the firm. I can give you a really great example from my old firm on the banking side. When we built models on our healthy side mergers and acquisitions bankers versus our distressed financial restructuring bankers, 2 very different profiles emerge. So you can start to understand that there are different types of people who have different characteristics and that are ultimately aligned to being successful and gravitating towards and being successful in any particular field.
Right.
Matt, can you talk about the models that you created for the legal industry? I know in our firm we separated the transactional and the adversarial practices, but what are the differences between the models between those 2 groups?
Yeah, I mean, without getting into specifics, for a privacy perspective or for our clients' data, what I might do instead of saying this is the difference between that or the types of things we see is maybe give an example of how all this works and how really machine learning is supercharging what is really actually, I mean, the field of industrial organizational psychology and using pre-employment assessments is nothing new. It's been around for decades. But what the combination of bringing now machine learning technology in allows us to create and understand a much greater degree and to a much greater level of accuracy. So the example I'll give is take 2 things, and actually these are 2 things that our assessment doesn't measure: introversion and extroversion. So we don't measure those in our assessment, but most people have a really common understanding of what those are. You can imagine someone who is on the extreme side of the introversion part of the spectrum being a highly successful attorney, just like you can imagine somebody who is an extreme extrovert also being a highly successful attorney. And so what makes them a highly successful attorney is not are they an introvert or are they an extrovert? It's what's the combination of characteristics that they're putting around it. And that's really where the understanding of the advent of machine learning in this field has taken it to a new level, because when we look at all the different characteristics we're measuring, we have over 100 different data points that we're collecting as part of our process, but we're looking at 10,000 different statistical combinations of that data. And what that tells us is that somebody who, under indexes in something that might be really, really critical to being a transactional attorney at Shepherd Mullen, Ali, in your case, may more than make up for it by over-indexing in a combination of all these other factors. And it's really that complexity of understanding both nonlinear characteristics and trait interaction terms where machine learning is doing its best work and being able to look across all those different combinations.
Okay, and just kind of consistent with what you and I have talked about, I know you're being very careful about mentioning AI versus machine learning. And
yep.
Can you comment on that? I think in our conversations, the term AI has been used, overly used, and your data science and your model is not a black box. You fully understand what are the interactions between different parameters and can explain it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is a really critical thing for folks to understand, especially when it comes to using, I'll use the term AI specifically here broadly in hiring, is that AI is a broad term. It can encapsulate everything from resume scraping and predicting off resumes. It can be facial recognition technology, all these different types of things. We are very specifically using supervised machine learning, where our machine learning engineers are hands-on using that technology to develop these customized models with great oversight. And Ali, what you're specifically referring to, I think, is really critical in the industries that we operate, investment banking and law. If we are building and training models on the incumbent, I'll use the term employees, whether they're bankers or attorneys as appropriate, in these industries, you have the potential to be picking up and potentially perpetuating biases because you're going to be oversampling white males in that population set. And so from the very beginning, Suited was built around the idea of being able to actually overcome a lot of the systemic bias and promote diversity within these industries. So we had to create a way to work around that. And so all of our technology is built around a couple different concepts. One is what we call explainable AI. So we don't believe in the black box. We have the ability to show on every single candidate against every single model that scored, why is that candidate getting that score? And that's a really critical thing from both a legal perspective, but also a practical one, is that hiring decision makers need to understand why is the model ultimately coming to this conclusion. And so our technology is really focused on that. The other is around equitable AI and ensuring that we're not perpetuating those biases that we are trying to remove. And our process does that through a lot of different parts of the model building process. But ultimately, in the end, we check every single model we build for every single firm against the entirety of our candidate pool. And so, by the earlier this spring, before this OCI cycle that's running right now, we had 10,000 law students come through the platform. We can take every single model we build for a firm, test that entire 10,000 candidates, look at their demographics and look at selection rates by demographic groups to ensure that the models are not treating members of any demographic group differently and meeting EEOC standards in that regard. And we do that not only at the point of deployment when we deploy a model for the first time, but on a perpetual basis where we're testing the models against the ever-growing candidate pool that we're ultimately building and deploying. And this is a really critical thing, especially because there is regulation that is coming, New York City being the most advanced, that actually goes into effect January 1st, that requires third-party audits of any type of AI models being used for these assessments. We are already well down that path. We've done internal assessments since inception and already have a partner lined up that's going to provide the third-party audits to meet those standards. So it's a really critical thing, both from a practical standpoint and from a legal one as well. So
Matt, can we get a little more concrete now? So give us a comparison for, say, what a law firm would have been doing with their interview process or their recruitment process before you, and now how has it changed? What is the new process?
Yeah, I'd say, most law firms, like most investment banks, frankly, like most companies that are out there, run some type of process where, depending on the job they're bringing in, and we're focused initially on the campus side of things, so hiring straight out of law school. We actually have a lateral product that we're doing a paid alpha development for that complementary product that will be coming soon. But on the campus side of things, most law schools have a limited number of candidates that they're able to reach and see. They focus in on a small set of target universities, typically have a bias towards the upper end of the GPA range. And so that emphasis on try to find the people who went to the best law school and had the highest GPA while they were there, one, creates a whole lot of competition at that for a small set of students. And two, both of those metrics, where they went to law school and the GPA they had while they're there, are all of our data that we've collected across the industry shows are not particularly predictive of long-term performance, and they have a ton of bias in them. We see a ton of systemic bias in resume-based data around who gets into what law schools, the grades they make while they're there. So because firms are using as a front-end screening process these metrics that are not particularly successful and have all that bias, it's creating this cascading set of negative effects where they're not getting any better hit ratio in terms of somebody ultimately coming on and succeeding or not, and they're severely impacting their own efforts towards diversity. And so our whole premise is about bringing a new hiring standard to bear. You know, firms are not wrong to have historically used those metrics because that was all that was available. And there are small correlations to future performance, so it's not wrong to use. But the correct way to say it is that's just not enough. In order to help firms be able to truly hire the top talent that's out there, and to do it, removing all those systemic biases that exist, and truly be able to get to a more equitable process.
But can you describe the new process then? In other words, what does a firm do? What is the
sure.
experience that the candidates has?
Sure. So the process with Suited is really twofold. I would say candidates come into the Suited platform really across two different paths. The first is they're direct referred by the firm. So we'll use Shepherd Mullen since Ali's here. Student applies to Shepherd Mullen. Either they end up on their OCI schedule that they're meeting in the law school interview process, or they apply as a direct applicant write-in. Shepherd Mullen refers those candidates over. Hey, we're partnered with Suited. The first step in our process is to complete the Suited assessment. Candidate clicks the link, goes, completes our assessment, and goes through. Now, importantly, and this is one of the things that's really critical about the network effect, is we have this assessment that we developed specifically for the legal industry that's leveraged by all of our different partner firms. I actually have I know for the folks who might be hearing this versus seeing it, this won't mean a lot, but I was just going to pull up our network of firms here to give folks a sense of who's ultimately included in that. Investment banks on the left-hand side, law firms on the right-hand side, just to orient folks. But we have 15 major firms that we're working with to date, and that number continues to grow every cycle. And importantly, because all these firms are leveraging this single assessment that we built, it means candidates only have to take it one time. And I think that's really the fundamental shift, because the industry has been interested in assessments or more data in the process for a while, but if every firm has their own assessment, it becomes an untenable situation for candidates. And so that shift in mindset to say, hey, all of these firms can participate on the same network, leveraging the same assessment, and it's something candidates only take once, makes it much more interesting and palatable to both candidates as well as the aggregators of candidates, in this case being the law schools. And so candidates ultimately get invited in by the firm to complete the assessment. The other thing that we Suited do is do a lot of direct outreach, in particular to non-target law schools for our group of partner firms, as well as to various student affinity groups like the Black Law Student Association, the Latinx Law Student Association, focused on bringing more candidates of non-traditional background, of non-target schools, and candidates from underrepresented demographic groups into the hiring process to really be able to expand that reach and expand that pipeline for all of our firms. Because really, when it comes to the question of diversity and being able to find that broader set of talent, it starts by being able to expand the pipeline, something that is very difficult for firms to do because most recruiting teams are relatively small. They're asked to do a very large lift in a hyper-compressed timetable. And the idea of expanding without making significant personnel investment is a challenge. This is one place where technology can really be an accelerant to a firm's efforts in that regard.
Great. So, hey, Matt, we're running short on time here, but there are a couple of areas that we definitely want to cover with you. One is your traction, which you've already started to talk about a little bit here. So maybe just say a few more words about how far you've gotten with this. And one question I had on that was, are you actually going to start looking at other adjacent spaces like in-house legal departments and other things?
Yeah.
And then the other area we need to talk about is just your capital formation history and planning. So
sure. Well, let me hit the traction one for you first. So we've launched investment banking and law. Our premise here has always been to be able to expand across industries. I think, and Howard, you touched on this right off the bat. I think before we start looking at other industries, we want to be more comprehensive in what we're doing. Where today we're focused on, our work is focused on law firms or investment banks. but we want to be able to move that to be focused on finance and legal roles. So yes, moving to looking at in-house roles, looking at government, public interest, being much more complete about the ecosystem of what do all of the candidates that we're ultimately servicing here go and do across the worlds of finance and law. Eventually we see being able to expand this across all of professional services at its core. And ultimately, we believe that this approach that we've developed will work in any industry where you have a large number of employers hiring a large number of people into relatively similar positions. And that really opens up a large landscape. But professional services being one that is very clear, meets that standard. And then in terms of from a traction perspective, I think one other slide that I'll switch to here is just looking at the network effects, right? So really, when we're talking about a hiring ecosystem, it's a marketplace, and there are two sides of that marketplace: buyers and sellers of talent. And so every new participant that comes into the platform, whether it's a firm or candidate, creates an incentive and a network effect for more and more folks to ultimately participate. And we're seeing that from a traction perspective play out. We made very heavy investments and some big bets early on in these industries that we operate in with our go-to-market strategy. We actually seeded the market with about 5 clients each time we launched, and gave it away for free for the first period of use to ultimately then drive more and more participants on the platform and really jumpstart that flywheel. So you can see, to date, we've got 30 major firms that we're working with across the 2 verticals, over 4,000 sets of attorneys or bankers across there that we've ultimately collected data on to build those customized models for our firms. We've reached over 50,000 candidates. That was actually before this current OCI and hiring cycle started in the fall. So I expect that number has already, and as we speak, and continuing to grow. So we continue to see this, those network effects and that sort of virtuous cycle of more firms equals more candidates equals more firms, continuing to grow. To answer your final question, Howard, from a capital perspective, so we've been entirely privately funded to date, all through high net worth individuals. We've raised about $10 million in total. Launched the business actually in 2017, with the first couple of years being some early development beta test work before we launched the investment banking platform in the spring of 2019. And so we've made some very significant investments and are now starting to see the benefits of those. We've also recruited, I didn't talk about the team that's supporting us here, an incredible team of experts where we have 4 PhDs full-time in the business across areas of artificial intelligence, industrial, organizational psychology. We have a full complement of product experts, data scientists, software engineers, as well as very experienced sales and marketing professionals across these end markets that we're ultimately serving. So we've really invested in building the team, the infrastructure, and those early investments to make this successful. And actually, right now, it's a good time to be answering that question, because we are about to open up a new round of capital that we think where we are, where our traction is, we've validated that we can build and do this in multiple different segments. And really, there's a ton of growth opportunities that we see in terms of both new products for our existing markets as well as new markets that we want to open up with that new raise. We think, frankly, a modest amount of investment, call it a $3 to $5 million sized round, actually will be able to position us to a point of profitability in the not too distant future, and really open up a different type of kind of investment and capital structure for us. That's really what we're focused on, is being able to drive that new round of capital from investors, and then ultimately look towards growing and continuing to build the business for the future.
Great. Well, I actually have one last question, Matt, and Ollie, maybe you have one other one too. But so with all of this, where will things end up with in-person interviews and resumes? I mean, are you going to kind of be edging that kind of piece of the process out of the picture, or to a certain extent, or where is this going to end up?
Yeah, I love that question, Howard. I think it's an important one for folks to understand, that we always tell our clients this, is we are never advocating that this is the silver bullet that's going to solve all of their problems all by itself. Resume data, it is predictive, not near as predictive as people think, and there's the bias issue that's ultimately in there, but it has value in the process. Just like interviews, whether they're virtual, whether they're in person, interviewers are able to elicit good information across those things. And so they're an important part of the process, but neither of those things are complete. Even with all the effort that firms put into interviewing and evaluating talent, they still, when those people start, have a range of performers. Some come in and succeed, some come in and really struggle, and everywhere in between. Being able to leverage an understanding of the individual's psychometric, personality type properties, as well as their overall value alignment with the firm, can really help speak to the likelihood of performance and ultimately retention of those individuals. Obviously, two things that are very in focus for most every firm that's out there. And so we view this as being a part of a complete process, not a replacement for the current process.
Ali, do you have anything else you want to ask?
I think we're good.
Excellent. Well, great presentation, Matt. Very eye-opening. Thanks very much for that. And we look forward to seeing you in Bonnie Doon.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks.